If you find that you keep getting into the same patterns in a relationship, well, maybe you're attracting the wrong kind of people, toxic people, or people that you know really aren't great for you, then you're in absolutely the right place. Because today I'm talking to an expert, Vanessa White, and she's going to tell you some of the habits that really, really can safeguard against those things happening. So great to see you, Vanessa, and I'm just going to hand straight over to you.
Thanks very much. It's lovely to be here again, Julie. Yes, absolutely. Today, I want to talk about relationship skills, particularly, obviously, healthy relationship skills. First thing to say is we are not taught relationship skills. We're not taught that at school, we're not taught it at university. We learn our relationship skills from what we see modelled around us. So usually that is our primary caregivers, so our parents in most cases. And we might be really lucky and have excellent, kind of secure, good relational skills that we see as we grow up. But often we're not so lucky. People might grow up where the relationship dynamic they're living with all the time and seeing is not that healthy, but that's what they think is normal. And so then they go out into the world trying to have a relationship, and it's like they don't really know what to do. And that's when they might get into patterns of behavior that are not that good for them, but they don't know any different. So I think it's a very important subject for me personally as a relationship and divorce coach, because we want people to try and have healthy relationships. And actually, that doesn't mean longevity of relationship. They're two different things. You can have a short relationship, but it's a really good one. It was a really great relationship, and it was really healthy in terms of how you related to each other and how you got on. And that's what we're really looking for. So for me, actually, whether you're talking about a relationship with yourself, with others, whether that's romantic or whether it's professional, there are kind of six pillars for me underneath healthy relationships. So I just want to kind of walk through those, because once we see these a bit more clearly, then we can kind of build on that in our own relationships. So the first one is authenticity. And, that is about being yourself in the relationship, quite simply. It's not about performing, shrinking, it's not people pleasing to keep the peace. Authenticity is really the freedom to say, this is who I am, this is what I need, and this is how I feel. And we want to be able to feel that we can do those things and be our true selves in our relationship first and foremost. And if for whatever reason we feel we can't, that is potentially an issue. Trust comes into this, and this is the second pillar, in my opinion, of healthy relationships. And trust is not just about, I believe my partner won't cheat, so I trust them, they're not going to go and sleep with somebody else. Obviously, that's part of trust. But for me, it's much broader than that. Trust is about, I can be truthful to this person. I trust this person that I can be honest with them, and they're going to react in such a way that is going to make me feel seen and heard, respected, even if they don't agree with me. And it's also about, I will not be ridiculed or punished for being honest with my partner. That is part of trust. Because if we don't trust that they might punish us, they might laugh at us, they might judge us, we're not going to be honest. We're not going to be authentic, as I just spoke about at the top. It's also about feeling safe to be the messy, imperfect person that I am. That is all about trust, because we're trusting our partner to see us as we are and to accept us warts and all, because no one is perfect. And we want to feel safe that we can be ourselves and that the person we're with is going to treat us with the respect when we are so. It's not about perfect behavior. Trust is really built through consistency of words and actions over time. That is key. We want to see what someone says and what someone does, that they pretty much match up. Not once, but consistently over time. And that helps us build trust. You know, we can have someone who's saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, but then they're treating us like the worst person in the world. We might be listening to, I love you, and ignoring the fact we are being treated like the worst person in the world. So we want the behavior when they're saying, I love you, to match that. That's what I mean, over time. And that's really important. And that builds trust. Then we have respect. And I've already used that word a few times today. And respect is about how we treat each other in all the moments, often the small moments. You know, it's not grand gestures, it's about tone of voice, it's about how we argue, how we repair. It's whether we can disagree without becoming adversaries, basically. And, you know, where respect erodes or has never been present, then there is a problem. And often things like physical intimacy diminish when we don't feel respected. We then don't want to necessarily sleep with our partner or do other things because we think, even in the small moments, you just don't respect me and you don't value me. So it has a really big kind of knock on effect to other areas in the relationship. So we want to feel like we're respected, and obviously we respect our partner. And if we feel we're constantly being disrespected, there's no value to what we say, no one listens to our opinion, or it's totally quashed and just dismissed at the sort of anything. I think we have to be really careful about what that means in a relationship, and can we rebuild respect? Was it ever there in the first place? I think also. And then, kind of, the fourth of these pillars of healthy relationships for me is open communication. Now, you and I have spoken before, and we know how important communication is, and it's kind of pivotal to everything in life, really, if we are dealing with another human being. I think it's critical. And, you know, in a relationship, particularly a romantic relationship, my view is you can never communicate too much. We don't generally communicate enough, any of us, in our relationship. We slightly hold something back, we don't quite say something, even the better communicators amongst us. So you can never, you know, if you think you're communicating quite well, double it down and do more. You can still do more. And for me, you know, this is not just we talk a lot. I hear this a lot. Oh, yeah, but we talk all the time. You can talk a lot, but say nothing at all. And I think we have to be really careful. Are we talking about the right things? Are we actually being authentic and expressing our needs and feelings? Or are we just talking very superficially? Oh, you need to pick the kids up tonight. Oh, can I have a cup of tea? You know, how was work, in a very kind of surface level way? Um, and really, we want to get under that and really be communicating about things that matter. And if we struggle to do that with our partner, we need to look at the authenticity, the trust, respect, because they can come into play. So it's about, you know, can I express discomfort? Can I say when I'm not happy or when things are not working for me? These might be hard conversations sometimes, but actually, can we do it? Do we feel we can say these things to our partner? Can we talk about sex without shame or defensiveness? You know, sex and money are two of the big things we don't want to talk about. And both of those are critical in relationships, or should be. You know, they're important topics. And if we're thinking we can't talk about things like that, that is also a problem, because then, you know, you have unresolved issues that lie under the surface and they get worse and worse and worse. And we don't want that in relationships. And I think, very importantly, do we listen to understand, not just to reply? Because very often we can be listening to our partner and we just do a reply, but we're not actually listening to them to actually understand where they're coming from. And that for me is really critical. And then we have collaboration. So, collaboration is, where kind of relationships thrive when both people are contributing. And, you can't have one person carrying a relationship, you can't have one person repairing a relationship. It is a collaborative team effort. And it's about doing things with or for the other person, for each other, to produce an outcome that is much more significant than if one person was trying to achieve it on their own. So essentially, as we work as a team, we're going to get a much better outcome than if we're trying to do it on our own. And it should be reciprocal. It's not about keeping score. And I hear this all the time. Oh, well, they did that and they haven't done that, but I do all this. We're not keeping score. We're not in debt to each other. Oh, well, unless they do that, I'm not going to do this. I hear that all the time. And it's like, no, it's actually what I would describe as more like a joint ecosystem. We might both have things going on in our lives, in work and in other areas, which means, sometimes we're carrying a bit less than the other. But generally, feels like a team. You feel like you're pulling in the same direction. You feel like you're each other's cheerleaders, importantly. You're not, tearing each other down or criticizing all the time for what you haven't done, what you have done. You feel like you're actually working together. And I think that's a really important thing. And whether that's really there or not. You can feel it, I think. And then we have effort, which is the kind of sixth pillar that I think is important. And I think it's about showing and telling your partner that you're in it. We're very good at effort in the early stages of a relationship. When we're dating, let's meet up, let's do this. We're organizing dates, we're showing all the effort to kind of see them and to make them feel special. And then effort can dwindle as we go through the relationship because we know each other very well, because life's just going on. And we lose some of the connection because the effort has gone down. And effort, I think, is interesting because people probably wouldn't perceive it as a key component of healthy relationships. But actually, it's about the micro moments, small gestures of effort, like checking in with your partner, showing basic kindness, expressing appreciation. Thank you for bringing me my tea in the morning, type of thing. Initiating connection, even if that's a small, meeting of eye contact as you're going through the kitchen, supporting each other, cheerleading each other. Those micro moments build connection. And if we lose those because we just stop making the effort, life's busy, you really notice it, because what happens is you start going like this because you feel less connected to your partner and you really struggle with kind of how you can rebuild that connection again. I feel like I've spoken
Oh
non-stop.
my goodness, I love what you've shared, Vanessa. It's so powerful, and I can really see, even though I might not have named those pillars in the way that you have, I can really see how every single one of those pillars is absolutely crucial to have a healthy relationship that's full of love and that deep connection. I want to go back to the first pillar of authenticity, which
Mm,
I'm all about. sharing with my clients how important it is to really be ourselves, and to embrace that. But in terms of communication, if someone watching this is not used to communicating and asking for their needs and expressing their feelings, and is there a simple, practical tip that you can share that might actually enable anyone watching to have some idea of how they might proceed with that and start to
Yes.
strengthen their communication skills?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really great point. And just to say around communication, I think there are a few destructive communication patterns that I often see, which I know that's the kind of opposite of what you just asked me. But if I just say that first, because I think it's quite important actually, because like I say, people might think, oh, we talk a lot, therefore we're good at communicating. But actually, some of these quite destructive communication patterns might be present even though you talk a lot. And I think we need to be clear on that. And I think, I see a lot of the first one, mind reading. So obviously, as we say, oh, they should just know what I need. They should just know what I want. They should just know how I feel. They know I've just got in from work, so they should know I want to be left alone for half an hour. Well, should they? Should they really? They're not inside here, even if you've been together for a long time. So I hear this a lot where mind reading goes on. And of course, that is where you then are not saying things. You're not saying, oh, I'd really like a cup of tea when I come in from work, or I'd really like just half an hour on the bed when I come in from work. And when they then come into the bedroom, when you're lying there, you then get cross, and it's like, what are you doing here? Because you're thinking, well, they should know I wanted to be on my own. So it can cause all sorts of problems in little and big ways. So that sort of they should just know what I need, and vice versa. We want to really look out for mind reading, and we want to tell people we actually want to communicate our needs. Hinting, this is another thing. So, hinting, if I subtly place my hand here, maybe they'll get that I want sex with them later. If I subtly put my hand on their knee while they're watching television, they'll get it that when we go upstairs, we're going to have sex. Well, are they? Are they going to connect that? Probably not. And again, there's lots of different ways of hinting. If I just say this sentence, they're going to know what the rest of what's going on in my head is there. Um, and we need to kind of, again, be clarity. So avoid this hinting at what we want. And then there's shutdown, which clearly is it's easier not to say anything at all. We just shut down, we zip it, we don't do anything. Communication really shrinks to just that kind of surface level. And, that is extremely detrimental when that starts, because then it's like, how do we start again when we've shut down to actually start communication in a meaningful way again? None of those things make you a bad person or a bad partner. They make you human, because we all do it. But actually, you know, communication is a skill. It's not a personality trait. So we can learn it, we can hone it, we can get really good at it. And that's a good thing. I think you asked me about good tips for communication. One thing, pick the right time to talk and be present, avoiding distractions. That's so simple in terms of, but it can make a massive difference to the conversation you then have, the way your partner picks up on it. So, simply, if you know you want to have a conversation with somebody, um, about something serious or something about how you feel or something about that's happened in your day, pick the right time and be present. So don't think, oh, I want to talk to you about this. And then you're sort of sitting there on your phone, also being distracted. Every time it beeps, you pick it up. Be present with your partner and ask the same of them. And you're going to have a much better potential outcome simply by doing that than trying to snatch a conversation when they've got in from work. They're trying to make a cup of tea, the dog's jumping up, their child's playing the guitar. You know, you're not going to get a great response than if you actually choose a better time. So I would say that's critical. If you want to talk about sex, particularly in physical intimacy, don't do it when you're lying in bed or when you've just had sex and it was rubbish. And then be like, actually, I want to talk about sex. You know, that's not the time. Pick the time when you're not in the bedroom, when you're fully clothed, when it's not sex time, and you actually are having a proper conversation. Um, Avoiding accusatory language. See, you never take the bins out. You always blame me for the dinner being burnt, you know, whatever. You and pointing, immediately it makes us go, oh, you know, we're like already got our backs up, got our guard up, got our defenses ready. It doesn't make us feel very good when we're on the receiving end. So we want to avoid accusatory language and physical gestures, um, because, again, it's not going to give you the result and the communication you want. There's a really good framework that I use that is very easy and very effective. And it's called the I feel, I need framework. So we're avoiding you and accusations. It's very simple, very powerful, very disarming. And you can use it at work. You can use it in any relationship. Anywhere you've got to have a conversation with somebody. So the two parts, I feel, so you start with how you feel. It's not accusation. It's obviously based on your emotion, which is hard for someone to go, well, you don't feel that. Well, that's wrong because we can't tell someone else how they feel. So I feel, and then I need, which is very clear, specific, and reasonable. And, you know, instead of like, you never want to spend any time with me anymore, which immediately makes people think, oh, gosh, you know, you could say, I feel a bit disconnected from you at the moment. I feel like we're, you know, not as close as we were. And I really need us to plan something together this week. Are you up for that? That sounds so much kinder, collaborative, you know, like you're really wanting to also make the effort to do something with them. And it generally will have a much better outcome, um, you know, than if we go pointing the finger and going, you're not doing this, you don't do this, you don't want to see me anymore. Let's start with, I feel, I need. It's very simple and it's very effective. Another tip would be avoid mind reading. We've already talked about how that can be a very destructive pattern of communication. Get clarity, because clarity is what gives us power and choices. Silence breeds uncertainty, and uncertainty erodes confidence. So, the more clarity we get, which is where we avoid mind reading and we actually converse with our partner, the more certain we are, the more choices we can make, and the more confident we are. I think another good skill around communication is being clear on your boundaries. Boundaries are crucial, and, you know, setting and upholding boundaries, that is a big part of communication. And if we feel like we can't express boundaries to our partner, that's an issue. Goes back to trust, authenticity, respect. And I would say, finally, on that, kind of critically, start as you mean to go on with communication. In dating, start as you want the communication to be, because things rarely change. If we don't communicate at the start, we avoid things, we people please, we don't say things, that is usually how things carry on. So early communication about boundaries, about your things, about your security and safety in the relationship is essential. And that is absolutely critical, because if you start off with poor communication, it will continue probably to be poor communication and may even get worse. So I hope that helps answer your question.
It really does, very thoroughly. Thank you, Vanessa. So, for those of you watching that can really resonate and accept what Vanessa's saying and really see that there's some value in changing perhaps the way you're doing things currently so that you can have a great relationship, then do check out the links below. Her links will be there. And do get in touch with Vanessa. She's such an amazing woman, and I know she'd be only too happy to answer any questions you might have. So, thank you very much, Vanessa, for sharing your wisdom, and thank you, everyone else, for watching.
Thanks for having me, Julie. It's an absolute pleasure. I love coming on.